Jake with Bond Performance here. I've got a pile of parts for my car and I finally have some time to install them. So I'm going to be doing SuperPro lower control arms up front. Gonna pick up, I believe it's a ½ degree of negative camber and a degree of negative caster from those. I've got some Bilstein B14s. I wanted to go with B16s, but they've been on back order for what seems like an eternity. So got these and all the mounting hardware from FCP. Got a breather from VTT. I'll touch on that later if I get a chance to remember. Control arms are in here. I got a new to me set of, I think they're A3 wheels, and some fresh made in USA Michelin all season 4 tires. So I don't know how much I'll actually get to show you of this, but it's been a while. I've been slacking on content, so I'm at least going to show a little bit of the process and get this worn out suspension off of here and refreshed. Definitely a big difference between what's coming off and what's going on. These Indy 500s have seen their day. I want to say I got about 23,000 miles out of them, but that's including some time at the tail of the Dragon and a track day at CMP, which is notoriously hard on tires, or at least it was. They just resurfaced the whole track, so I don't know if that's still the case. And excuse me, I believe they're actually doing a track day tomorrow, but I will not be attending because these are all seasons, these are shot, and this still needs a limited slip. Even if I did have time to get in alignment before the track day, poor traction and tires that aren't suited for the track are just a kind of a foolish combo. So I'll get back to it. Just wanted to show you guys that. And I'm going to start with pulling the fender liners off and start taking the front suspension apart. In addition to the lower control arms, I actually got some ball joints too. So I'll probably just take those out kind of as a unit, and we'll show you guys a little bit more of that. All right, so I've got all of the fender liners out on both sides and the rear. Disconnected the sway bar end lengths on both sides. We're not fighting that. The lower shock mount bolt and the lower control arm to knuckle bolt, and that's going to allow the springs to just rotate out of the rubber they're captured in at the bottom of the lower control arm. Now, these aren't stock, these are VWR. And if any of you have ever noticed that my car has a little bit of a rake to it, that's because I'm running these Audi rear spring pads. The DSG is heavier, so for a manual car to sit level, you want to have the thicker rear pads on the rear if you're into that kind of thing. Some people don't care if the car's sitting rear end low, but I prefer it to sit level. So I'm gonna keep going with that. There's one 10mm that holds this canister. This is the evap canister for your fuel tank, so it's only on the passenger side. A couple of 16s up there. We'll be able to pull the shock and mount assembly out. And just FYI, these are 18mm on both sides. These are 13mm on both sides. And like I said, the fender liner hardware is all T25 for you guys taking notes. I'm gonna keep going. All right, moving on, I've got the spring in place. Just like OEM, it spins into and secures on the rubber grommet on the lower control arm. It's got a provided rubber isolator up top, another thin polyurethane one below the adjusters here, so you don't have metal on metal. And then you just want to just barely snug these adjusters so you're able to get them loose if you ever need to. So this is all just kind of tacked in here. I've just got this bolt slid in. I want to touch on the assembly of the actual shock absorber itself. I cut the OEM bump stop since we're reducing the travel. We're going to retain the dust boot. Here's the old OEM mount, new one from FCP. Lifetime warranty on that. So this will zip tie on there. The assembly will slide together. And OEM's just got your wrench flat. Bilstein and a lot of other aftermarket will have an Allen key. So that's just anti-rotation. You hold that and spin the nut down and then torque the spec. So OEM is 16, Bilstein is 17. So remember, you're not spinning the shaft, and absolutely no matter what, never ever use an impact on these. Always run these down by hand and torque them to spec. I've got some Allen sockets I've talked about. So I'm gonna assemble this and continue on. Here's the front sitting here. Now, I definitely recommend choosing your starting ride height and setting it all the way around off the car. It's a lot easier to do on the bench. I'm showing 5 threads all the way around. On Evan's Blue Rabbit, he's shown 4 threads. And coming in the approach to my garage door, he just barely rubs his lip. So I'm hoping to avoid that. It probably really won't make a difference. It's like a 50-50 shot if he rubs, but it's the thought that counts. So I'm gonna keep going with this and show you guys how the rear looks all assembled. All right, so I've got the shock mount built up, the boots on, the canisters back in, and just aligning the suspension. We call this suspension preload. Got everything lined up with this jack. Now for you guys doing this on the ground, this is where your floor jack comes in handy. So you're not destroying your hardware getting it into the hole, because at this point in the job you're fighting spring pressure. Granted, it's not much, but having a jack as your third hand makes a huge difference here. So I just wanted to show you guys that. Also, make sure you remember your dust boot when you assemble your rear strut mounts. Easy to forget, and you don't have to take your fender liner back off. So I'm gonna keep on moving it. If I think anything else that'll be helpful for you guys, I'll be sure to include it. All right, so the rear's wrapped up, getting the fronts built up. So as I've talked about in the threads on the forums, you want to make sure you're not fighting spring tension. So we only really needed 1 spring compressor on here, as Brendan showed. And we're holding the center shaft with an Allen socket, 7mm, and 22mm O2 sensor socket. So that is torque to spec. This is by far the most important. Don't want to skimp out on this step, because you will end up redoing the whole job if you just zing it down with an impact. Pretty much guaranteed. So I'll have to pull it out with a pair of pliers, but regardless of what, some flat rate, get it done, get it out, don't care if it comes back, texts say, do not ever use an impact on this. Take the time, buy the tools, torque it down, you won't regret it. It'll save you lots of taking that apart. All right, so I've got a camera guy now, Brendan, and we're gonna start with taking the sway bar end links loose I'm gonna hold it with a M6 triple square and turn it with an 18. And I always just go ahead and disconnect them both right off the bat and wait till you're all the way done to reconnect them so you're not fighting the tension of the sway bar at all during the job. And just to point things out, we're going to be doing the lower control arms too and ball joints. So I'm just going to disconnect the spindles here, disconnect the lower control arm there, put my strut spacer in, and we'll be able to drop all this out of the way. So I'm not going to have him bore you guys too much. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll show you what it looks like all tore apart. All right, so just trying to push to get this sway bar end link off of mine. I compress the suspension a little bit. Here, coming close. This is why we're doing this.
It's not supposed to do that.
Yeah, it shouldn't sound like a bowl of macaroni and cheese when you compress your front suspension. That's blown. Blown, blown, blown.
Also shouldn't compress under the weight of your arms.
Well, I mean, it is full droop, so I'm not fighting that much spring pressure, but that sounds extra juicy and that's not good. So once I disassemble that, I'll show you how blown it is or isn't. All right, so we got the B14s all built up with the new OEM hardware. Now this is gonna look pretty crazy, but there's a method to our madness here. Because we're also doing ball joints, there is a Torx bit. There's a T40 and then 18 millimeter, securing that to the spindle. So I've got the OEM lower control arm out. The brakes are supported so they're not pulling on the line. The axle's out, and I use my strut spreader to release the bottom of this. So it's kind of in a weird predicament here the way it's all held up. I've got that back there just in case, because why not? So I'm just going to go up on a ladder to get those 13 millimeters that hold the strut to the tower. But before we do that, we're going to swap in our new ball joint and then start going back reverse order. B14, lower control arm, put the axle back in, connect the ball joint to the lower control arm, hang everything back up, and move on to the next one. So there would be a completely different approach if we weren't doing ball joints and lower control arms. You just pull the axle nut out, slide the axle back, take the ball joint off the lower control arm, slide all this outboard, support it, and then drop the strut out. But it just makes sense to do it all at once if you're going to. Saves a lot of labor. If you're curious, those are 18 millimeter. There's a bolt that goes this way with a captured nut, and then back here there's a bolt that comes up through to a nut, so you're gonna have to get your 18 millimeter up there. From what I've heard, the DSG guys might have a harder time with this, so I can't speak to that because this is a manual. Got plenty of room. I actually just stuck my little impact up inside this tray. I didn't even take the tray off. But if you have a DSG, you may or may not have a harder time with that. As my beer assistant just pointed out, brought out the new bling bling. Yeah, so that's about half the weight. I don't have a scale, but if nothing else, it looks really freaking cool for all the people that hang out underneath your car. But it's all about the scene points. Get the show car mirrors out every time you go to Cars and Coffee. All right, so I'm gonna go up top. I know I don't always include all the tools, but I wanna be serious for a minute. You're gonna need a 12-foot ladder. Now I know you guys doing this on the ground are gonna say, Jake, why do I need a 12-foot ladder? Listen, it's a requirement for the job. Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. All right, so get up on your 12-foot ladder. Make sure you bring your packs.
I'm short, wait a minute.
Yeah. sure you pull the clips out of your cowl cover. Yeah, you don't need to get up here. So anyway, there's 313s. Don't arc your battery to ground. Don't break your cowl cover. Get those puppies loose and you can drop the whole strut assembly out. Brendan can dip down and show you. We removed the ball joint on this side. It did take some tools that you may actually want to have on hand, unlike this 12-foot ladder. We had to use my tuning fork and a
Bagel fork. Close enough.
And well, I call it a tuning fork. Call it what you will. And burn some mag torch to get that ball joint. Well, actually get the spindle hot to get the ball joint out. So that's cooling off on the ground. And I'm gonna need my camera guy to come grab this strut because it's running out of hardware up here. You wanna come grab that, Brendan?
Oh, I'm not wearing a hat.
What?
I'm not wearing a hat.
You're not wearing a hat? Oh man, people are gonna see.
No, God.
People
No.
are gonna see how old we look. So we're down off the ladder. Keep in mind, these 6 bolts, 3 per side, are stretch hardware. You're gonna wanna use new ones. These pinch bolts, strut body to spindle for one-time use. You wanna grab new nuts for those. And just preventative, I mean, my car's got 95,000 miles on it, which is why I'm doing ball joints, because I'm hoping these bad boys last a good while. But if not, FCP's got my back with their lifetime warranty. And they're nicely marked left and right. Also, everybody, I mean, it's like 50-50 whether people like the 2x4 method or not. I don't. I think it's kind of hokey. I think it's a little bit dangerous. People will yell at me for that, whatever. These axle bolts are definitely one-time use because they get torqued to a metric shitload. The car will have to be on the ground, the brakes will have to be on to be able to achieve that torque. Don't quote me on this. I want to say it's 167 foot-pounds plus 180 degree turn, which is like 400 foot-pounds. It's a lot. You'll see Jesus just as you reach that torque spec. So I probably, you know, if I don't have a cameraman here when I do that, you hit your initial torque and put a line on it, and then keep going with your breaker bar until your line's pointing the opposite way. That's how you get your 180. And also, you want to make sure you put your old bolt in the axle while you're screwing around with other stuff so all your axle grease doesn't end up on the floor. It happened to me the first time. It might happen to you. Avoid the mess and avoid having to ask the question what kind of axle grease goes in there, because frankly nobody knows.
And it stinks.
It is very stinky.
This is a hat.
Alright, so this side's all together, torqued down. Pro tip for this connection right here, if you're going to do these SuperPro control arms, get a big old pry bar and just give this a little pry. I loosened this bolt and that bolt, which probably wasn't necessary. I'll find out on the next side. But these pillow ball, whatever they call them, bushings in here barely fit even after you've opened that up a little bit. So save yourself the hassle, open that up. I just want to show the difference. You can visibly see the added camber, which is what we're going for tire wear on the track. So just looking down the side of the car, you can see what this side looks like. Versus this side. So the alignment will tell the true story. I think I had about 1.5 degrees of negative camber before. I probably have a spec sheet somewhere in the glove box. But we're gonna continue on with the other side. Eventually put those fender liners back in. Move our 12-footer over here. Required equipment. Don't forget. So here we are. If you've watched up to this point, thanks for sticking with it. course, gotta throw props to the On Performance downpipe, intercooler, and of course the whole turbo back exhaust. Everything is back together, torque to spec, looking good, looking shiny. The fender liner's back in. If you haven't seen the previous videos, we've got Stop Tech axle pack and R32 brakes off a Mark V on the back. Stop Tech ST40s on the front. Check out buybrakes.com for those. Mention Jake, that might give you some free brake fluid or maybe some swag. If you mention Ball and Performance, GTI Jake, or just Jake. I did finally get the couplers. Just need one, but I ordered two because I have a friend with the same Mishimoto charge pipes. I'm debating if I really feel like throwing that on. I'm gonna throw the wheels on first. Just a few things to watch out for if you're doing this at home. These connectors on each side are for your ABS sensors. Make extra sure not to damage those. You will have a Christmas tree of dash lights after doing a job like this. Just nature of the beast. Usually by the time you back to the end of your driveway and or turn out onto your street, they will go away. If they don't, that is the first place to check. If you've got traction control, ABS, airbags, all that stuff talks to the ABS sensors. So if you crap your pants because your dash looks like a Mark IV, just start there. So I'm gonna pull the center caps off two of these, throw them on. Like I said before, you can't torque these with it in the air. It needs to be on the ground with somebody holding the brake. I don't have anybody to hold the brake. Cameraman went home, so just gonna at least set it on the ground, see how it looks. I'll show you guys the outcome, see if it looks all cambery like a real race car. And then of course, I'll follow up after the alignment, after I get to shred some turns and let you guys know what I think. Probably not gonna pull these apart today. We'll wait until we get a buyer lined up for them. I've been out here working on this for 5 hours now, so I'm ready to go eat dinner. But just want to get it set down on the ground. Maybe I can drag the wife out here, have her hold the brake for me, and hang tight for just a little bit longer, and I'll show you how it looks on the ground. All right, there it is. Still need to torque the wheels and torque the axle bolts. I'm gonna save that Vargas breather for another video. So I'll be doing a follow-up in a day or two. You guys can wait till then on that, right? And hopefully then I'll have an alignment and have a good impression for you. This will settle a little bit more. Should be about a 1/4 inch lower than it was on the VWR springs. Not going for slammed, going for performance, and so you need to be able to make it into the building. So there it is. I'm gonna save the how blown are they for the next one too. So subscribe if you haven't. 90% of my viewers aren't subscribed according to the YouTube statistics. So if you can mash that button, you can even turn off the notifications so I don't bug you. I would definitely appreciate it. Trying to hit that goal of 1,000 subscribers. So everybody that hung in this long, thanks. I hope this helps somebody. Again, do not use an impact. I don't care what people tell you, that's a good way to do the job twice. Use a torque wrench. If you don't have a torque wrench, buy a torque wrench. If you can't afford one, probably shouldn't mod your car, but I'm sure you can find somebody who's got one you can borrow. So, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. And real quick, I proved myself wrong. I was able to torque it without somebody holding it. So, if you've got a good chock and a big cheater bar, then you could probably do it on your own, as long as it's on the ground. Just be careful not to mess up your wheels or your fender in doing that. So, just need to set tire pressures and it's ready to drive. Thanks for watching, guys.